Hello and welcome back to Calyx Cafe. Today I am talking to Joe McDonnell and Jeff Timmons, who are both from Merck, about the Merck and Organon spin-off. I can't wait to get started. Hi everyone and welcome back to Calyx Cafe, where today I am joined by not one but two guests, Joe McDonnell and Jeff Timmons from Merck, and we're going to talk about the Organon spin-off. Hi Joe and hi Jeff, welcome to the Calyx Cafe. How are you today?
Good morning, Sylvain. Very well. Thank you.
Hello, doing well, thank you.
So thank you for joining us today. Do you have any drinks or should I take your drinks orders?
I have my coffee right here. Thank you.
Yeah, and mine as well, so I'm good, thank you.
Very nice. What do you usually go for? Do you have a special drink?
For me, the first thing in the morning is a triple espresso to supercharge my day, and then I move on to regular coffee.
Yep, and I start with just regular coffee, but you know, two to three cups a day, and I'm good to go. So thank you.
Okay, I like the supercharge your morning. That's that's good. All right, so before we go into talking about the spin-off itself, I'd quite like to know where you started in the industry, how you got into Merck. So would you be able to share that with us, please?
Sure. I'll start. I joined Merck right out of grad school in 1988. Started off in basic research. I was an in vivo pharmacologist. As Merck has always put an emphasis on career development, one of the things I discovered is that the company supports your educational advancement in any area of Merck, not just in the sciences, for me, for example. And so I went on for my MBA and then eventually my MPH. And as a result of that, I moved over to the regulatory side of Merck in 1996. And I've been in regulatory in different capacities, but pretty much in the regulatory area since then. So I guess you would say I'm a Merck lifer.
Nice. How about you, Jeff?
Yeah, so I started, I guess, 10 years after Joe. If Joe was 88, I was 98. But I came in through the steering plow ranks, so I was a power builder programmer and started when we had an in-house product registration system that we built. I then moved on to the regulatory business, where I spent 7 years reporting to the head of regulatory operations. I then came back to IT, essentially to run the migration for what we know today as our product registration tracking system, Orion.
Wow, both very interesting paths, many different roles within Merck. That's amazing. So we'll go into the spin-off itself, but I think our audience would be interested in, first of all, understanding what your involvement in the spin-off itself was. But before we go into that, would you be able to share with us why this spin-off occurred?
Yeah, I think we're allowed to share things now, since it's all in the public domain. So this really goes back, I would say, to when Merck merged with Sharing in 2009 to improve its pipeline. There were a lot of Sharing products that were very complementary to where Merck wanted to go. However, Sharing, and Jeff, you know this better than I do even, Sharing had purchased Organon, which did exist back then in 2007, which had a specialty in women's health. And since that merger with Sharing, we've been trying to kind of balance that. And I think what the company has found is that the portfolio is so varied, and in order to focus on the key areas that Merck wants to focus on, and especially to get a stronger footprint in the oncology area, it really made sense to diversify, right? So to take the women's health as well as the first line drug products and spin those off so that could be a specialty company, and then we can focus on the areas that we really wanted to focus on.
So it's a case of focusing on your key areas then. That makes sense, yes. And as you know, we've also been through a spin-off ourselves, and that's something that actually we can relate to very much. So in terms of the spin-off itself, would you be able to tell us how you first got involved in it and what your role was, please?
Sure. So I think Jeff and I were brought under the tent, and under the tent is a term saying, indicating that you were privileged to, at the time, that's very confidential information. So I was brought under the tent about a year and a half prior to spin, and we were told that the first major system that had to go live was going to be Orion, which is Merck's version of the Insight product. I represent the business side of Orion, and Jeff represents the IT side. So it was important that we had to be up and ready before any other system, and I'm happy to say that we were.
How about you, Jeff? How did you come into the team or under the tent?
Yeah, so just to kind of add on to what Joe was saying, so this concept of being under the tent, I think originally there was some higher level IT management that was kind of brought in originally, and then Joe kind of sent out a plea for my assistants to come in and help him with the, being kind of my partner in crime here at Merck. But yeah, it's exactly as Joe described. The implementation was very aggressive. We had, obviously due to the sensitivity of the transaction, right? Working with Calyx, working with different vendors, getting NDAs in place and so forth, to make sure that this kind of stayed under wraps, because it was not public knowledge that we were spinning off a separate company here. But again, like Joe said, we delivered on one of the first systems for Organon due to the critical nature of product registration tracking and product release, marketed product release, which was critical to the new company. So that's the story.
Well, congratulations. It sounds like you achieved something very, very important for the company. So you both mentioned the timelines, and I think you said that it was quite short timelines in a way, but you also mentioned, Joe, that you were brought into the tent a year and a half before the spin-off. So it seems quite long, but I imagine there's quite a lot to do. So would you say that this process was long enough for you, or was it, were you under pressure at all?
It definitely was under pressure, right? Because they were bringing people on in waves. And certainly there were people that were under the tent far longer than Jeff and I. The first thing that I discovered when I was brought under the tent, that we needed to bring additional people under the tent, people from my team, Jeff, and people from his team as well, because not only did we have to replicate the Orion environment for Organon in a new system called Reliant. The good news is that we had already done an evaluation of other vendors for registration management tools, and we were pretty confident that this was best in breed, right? So we knew that we didn't have to look at any other potential tools for Organon. The problem was, though, that we were going from an on-prem based system to a cloud-based system, and so for that very reason, we needed to have more IT involvement. And we had to replicate over 180 reports and queries that we had done. So that was an awful lot of work that needed to be done. A year and a half may sound like a lot of time, but it really isn't for all of that work that needs to be done. And there's always that initial phase of people just kind of stumbling over each other, trying to figure out what needs to be done next. And it seemed at each juncture we were stymied a little bit because there weren't the appropriate people who were under the tent who had an expertise. So a lot of the time in the beginning was spent requesting additional people under the tent, at least from the business perspective. I know Jeff has a different take on the IT side.
Yeah, and definitely from the IT side, like Joe mentioned, bringing the people was certainly one aspect of it, but the other was the technology, right? The new company, for example, did not even have a network stood up. So like Joe mentioned, we were moving from an on-prem to a cloud-based solution for Organon. We didn't even have a network stood up at the time. So we're essentially blazing a trail to stand up things like VPN and tunnels and things like this with the networking team, in real time, because again, the network and the facilities for that, the infrastructure had not been established at that point. So we did have those sorts of challenges, but again, we overcame and I think blazed a trail for a lot of other applications that came after us with this, network, basic network things that you assume are in place, right? But when you're standing up a new company and data center and things along those lines, those things were challenges that we certainly overcame for that.
Wow. So if I understand correctly, you had to build a full network from the ground up, and you also had to keep it a secret from a lot of people within Merck, and I assume a lot of people outside the company as well. Is that right? Did I get it right?
Yep, that's 100% right. Like Joe said, as we moved through the project and needed, so for example, we brought in a project manager and things along those lines, right? But from a technology standpoint, right, working with a third-party networking vendor, not somebody that I'm used to working with every day, but again, to set up that infrastructure for the new company, and again, they were building out the entire data center, both co-located, on-prem and cloud-based, to support Organon for everything from email to basic authentication. So that was kind of some of the challenges we were up against for this implementation, because everything was brand new.
Well, that's incredible. And so, did you have to keep it a secret as well from partners, or were you able to share with partners? And if so, how did you manage the secrecy around it by still opening with other partners?
Yes. So in terms of partners other than Calyx, I don't think there was a big need to know. I know initially the idea was that we weren't even going to bring on we were only going to bring on one or two individuals from Calyx. It was Parexel at the time. And we were very adamant that we needed to bring on other individuals that we had a long-standing relationship with in the regulatory consulting area, because there were some other challenges that we knew that we were going to face. And we persuaded them to bring those folks on. And I think having a robust partner team, Parexel, later Calyx, on board really made the difference of making it successful, right? So, that was an important thing that we kind of had to fight for.
Yeah, and another thing I'll point out, sorry, Sylvan, but we kind of started each meeting with, are you under the tent, right? To kind of establish up front who was okay to, continue the discussion and who was not, because again, with NDAs and, confidentiality agreements and things like that needing to be in place, it was very, very sensitive nature, this project. So, and we had code names for everything. So that was another thing to try to keep track of, the project code names and what they meant for different aspects of the project.
Yeah, I get that. And by the way, did they let you out of the tent, or are you still locked in the tent?
Well, I think the tent is open to everyone now. although we are certainly not done with this process by any means, right? There are a myriad of TSAs in place because a lot of our knowledge went to Organon. A lot of Merck employees went to Organon, and it was agreed that until that knowledge transfer occurs, that they would still assist. There's also products that are intended to go to Organon that have not transferred yet, so they will be supported by the Organon staff, but they now need access to both Reliant and Orion, right? The two versions of the Insight installation at the different companies. And so we have meetings, I would say, Jeff, on at least a weekly basis, if not daily basis, on the data transfer from the Orion system to the Reliant system, and maintaining the access for Organon employees back into our system. So, while it may seem on paper that it's done, it's still a long way to go. And I think we'll be working very closely with these individuals at least until 2023, if not further.
Wow, that's a very long process, but it sounds like you really have it very well thought, and it seems like a very well structured process. So I'm conscious of time. I don't want to take too much of your time, but before we wrap up, I would really be interested in understanding from you if there's any lesson learned from your side that you would use if you had to go through a similar process. And I'm sure everyone will find that very interesting.
Sure. From the business side, I think the biggest lesson learned is even if the company says this is your number one priority, it doesn't stop all of the other work, right? We work in a regulatory area. So maintaining registrations and maintaining regulatory compliance cannot be put on hold because you're doing a spinoff, right? So as much as it's nice to say you should give 100% effort to this, it wasn't possible. So a key lesson learned is we really need to backfill in certain areas so that we can do both things, because we had to continue to do our jobs. We even did 2 upgrades of the Merck version of Orion during that period of time because we needed it to stay compliant from a regulatory perspective. In the future we'll be in the cloud and that will be less of a hassle, but while on-prem, that's an awful lot of work. And another lesson learned is that we're learning right now, if you're in a situation like this and a good portion of your colleagues and long-term friends are moving over to another company, it becomes very difficult to start viewing them as another company and a partner, as opposed to a friend that you've worked with for 20 some years. And so there are asks that come in that may not be completely appropriate, and you have to get comfortable with saying, no, we can't really do that. You have to go through the proper channels. It's not me talking to you, it's Merck talking to Organon, and that is the agreement that's in place. And that can be difficult at times.
Yeah, I fully understand that. We've experienced exactly the same thing at our end, and it's I agree with you. It makes it relatively difficult at times, but you always need to remind yourself of the process you've been through. How about you, Jeff? Any lesson learned from your end?
Yeah, I think I could reiterate the same that Joe mentioned, because again, we still had our day jobs, right, and had our Merck responsibilities and regulatory compliance objectives to stay on track with, while at the same time spinning up a new company. So I think the concept of backfill is an important one. Again, if not for the new company, for helping out with some of our existing day jobs with Merck, right? On the specific to the IT side, again, the thing I mentioned about the infrastructure, I think that was key. And again, standing up a new company is not something you do every day, right? But again, I think working in collaboration with the networking and the infrastructure folks to just make sure everybody's on the same page as far as what we're doing here. And a lot of it was kind of seat by our pants. We were just flying and standing up a new network for Organon as we went, which, oh, by the way, we're connecting out through various clouds, through AWS, through Azure and others. So it was definitely a lesson learned there to have some, key collaboration concepts to working with our fellow IT and with Joe in the business, obviously. But that was, I'd say, the lessons learned for us.
Yeah, Jeff, you remind me of something too. If you're ever involved in this and you hear someone saying it's a simple clone and go,
Yeah.
I would run, because there is no such thing as a simple clone and go, because a system like Insight is connected to so many other systems, and system A will be replicated, but system B will be different. And so there is no such thing as a simple clone and go, right? There's challenges at every integration point as well.
Yeah, it sounds easy enough. Yeah, just clone the system in the cloud, right? And away we go. But I think we all know it's a little more challenging than that, right?
Yes, no system is in isolation now, and you need to consider the full architecture around it. Very, very good point, and thank you for sharing those lessons learned. My last question, which is always the same one, but we really like to hear from our guests what they'd like to see in the future of clinical trials, or for yourselves in regulatory, for example. So is there anything that you see in the future that gets you excited?
Yeah, I other than the science, because I'm a scientist first and foremost, the changes and things that I never thought would come about, like the FDA, the TGA, and Health Canada actually doing joint reviews for oncology products, that's pretty exciting. And I think for me personally, what gets me going and charges me is there are so many opportunities to take this really complex regulatory environment and add technical solutions, working with vendors such as Calyx. And now there's robotic process automation, there's workflows, there's a lot of great new technologies that we can overlay on this to make it easier and better. And while from a day-to-day standpoint, it may not look like we're dealing with the same problems, if having the advantage of being at Merck so long, if I step back and look at our technology, even from just 10 years ago, we've made substantial strides, and I think that's just going to continue to get better, and that's what I find exciting.
So technology for simplification, essentially.
Right. The regulatory environment gets harder and harder, so how do we help take that burden off the users and make the system simpler and simpler?
Okay. How about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I think from the technology side, again, like Joe mentioned, the regulatory landscape is constantly changing, right? So with new things like ECTD4 and some of the things coming out of the EU with the UCTR and IDMP, right? Being able to essentially make this as seamless as possible for the user, because again, they don't really. Not they don't care, but they don't, the details that underneath are secondary to the technology, right? So if we can make it easier for the users to, do their jobs and at the same time staying compliant and being able to, support our community, then I think we're in a good place.
Yeah, and that sounds like what we should all aim for. So I fully agree with you, 100%. So that's all we've got time for today. But it's been very, very interesting. So thank you both for joining me here at Calyx Cafe. And to everyone who's been watching this video, I'm sure you found it as interesting as I have. And thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon at the Calyx Cafe.